You hear me okay, Courtney?
Yes, you sound good.
Okay. Oh, you brought a fireplace too. You said fireplace chat. So I brought my fireplace with me. Eric, thanks for joining. Eric, I thought we'd just start out by you kind of explaining your supply chain background, what your responsibilities are.
Yeah, sure, Jeff. So I've been with Ameren for a little over 30 years, but supply chain since 2022. I worked mostly in the business segments throughout my career. Then I came into the corporate services as senior vice president in 2021, and then took over supply chain in 2022. So I'd say on this side of the fence, relatively new when it comes to the supply chain world, but certainly have done a lot of work over my 30-year career with supply chain throughout the rest of my job duties here at Ameren.
All right, very good. And I think you and I in common, our careers span about the same amount of time. My initial indoctrination in the supply chain was back in the early 90s when NAFTA was hitting. And I worked for a large diverse industrial that was moving some equipment around down to Mexico initially, and then overseas. Back in the mid 2000s, I took on supplier quality roles and traveled internationally trying to find good suppliers that could give us good products. So my passport was pretty thick back then. And then in the mid 2000s, I had purchasing and global sourcing roles, and before joining RF, a couple of years as a consultant doing global sourcing strategy for clients and quality engineering work. Okay, so that gives a little bit of lay of the land on our background. First thing I'd like to talk about, during the pandemic, we saw a lot of supply chain disruptions. I'm kind of curious what you see on your end. Are things getting better? Are they getting worse? From your perspective, what do you see for supply chain disruptions? Better, worse?
I'd say overall better, certainly since COVID. And I got a slide I can show here in a little bit, but I think in general, we've seen lead times improved quite a bit for almost all categories. There's really only two, and and I'm not a WebEx guy, so let me try to, it says I can't share content.
Courtney could help you with that.
Yeah.
I'm getting there. 1 second. There you go. Should be able to present now. Perfect.
It says can't share content unless the host, co-host, presenter makes you a presenter.
Probably a little bit of a lag.
There we go. Where's it at? Again, apologize. I'm not the tech guy from. Oh, entire screen. Here we go. Yeah, I'll have to move it. It's not letting me show my second screen. Oh, there it is. All right. Now, hopefully you can see it.
We can see it.
All right. So yeah, we can kind of start from the top, but this is a slide that my market analysis team puts up, and I've redacted some of the suppliers that we have just, but from an illustrative purpose, you can see like the purple dots. If you focus on the purple dots, that's when COVID was hitting supply chain. A lot of the equipment lead times went way up. Distribution pad mount transformers, both single phase and 3-phase, really jumped up in lead time. And now you can see the current is 12 weeks for us for a distribution transformer, single phase, and about 17 weeks for a 3-phase. So you can see from the purple dots, most of it has slid to the left, which is good, improving lead times. But the two that have slid to the right are, of course, gas turbines, as the build out of retiring a lot of the fossil generation across the country, as well as, you know, the addition of data centers requiring more energy. CTGs, both simple cycle and combined cycle, they've really increased in lead time. And then you can see the voltage instrument transformers. We've had a little bit of a spike in those, but for the most part, the rest of the lead times have been improved since 2022.
All right, very good. Some good data. It's interesting seeing that. You know, one thing that comes to mind when we talk that's fairly related, especially as a lot of things are becoming to be more and more onshore. You know, it's been reported that the labor market, the skilled labor market, just continues to tighten. And I'm wondering what you're experiencing there, and what do you believe will be kind of the short and long-term implications of this shortage?
Yeah, so I think in the short term, we've had to shift in our own portfolio projects around, but maybe some from the distribution to the transmission, or maybe some more towards the generation or data center build out, which again, then in many cases is transmission type build out. So our total project capital has been about the same. So I think the labor that we use on those traditional projects is really maybe just shifted from project to project. So not really seeing a huge constraint right now. Although as we look at some of the build outs, I guess where the concerns that I have are skilled labor for some of these larger projects or one of a kind projects, you know, like I think we're in good shape for currently going under construction for some simple cycle generation. I think we're in good shape for those. Our large combined cycle, we have 2 units that we're planning to add by 2032. And that to me is where there's not a lot of big players left. It's been a while since we had since the mid 2000s or early 2000s, since we had a big build out of gas fired generation. So I guess that's where my concern is, more around in the 2028 to 2032 on skilled labor to build a lot of these big, gas-fired plants, or even some of the battery storage we have underway. There's just not a lot of suppliers that have really good skills, or they haven't done it in a while. So that's really where my concern is at on some of those larger projects. I think the T&D effort we got. I think we're in fairly good shape for now, but again, as that continues to increase, there's certainly a risk of skilled labor. And I'm talking mostly construction labor here, but again, there's also skilled labor when it comes to the engineering, the design, the project management of those large projects as well. And so finding the right skilled labor to do that can be challenging, bringing it in-house, or just finding the right consultants or partners to partner with.
As you think about, across all different sectors, really everyone's competing for the same group of people, right? Yeah. You have electricians, any commercial type building project. You have all the electricians, HVAC techs, plumbers and pipe fitters, welders. Even you think about the diesel truck technicians, how important they are just to keep the trucks moving and the materials going across the country everywhere. And it doesn't take much time to research and find all the negative stories out there, or you want to look at it the other side, the opportunities for folks to get into these skilled positions. We have aging workforce, but the vast majority of construction companies out there report that they're having a hard time finding skilled laborers, and rising wages, and it could lead to project delays and increased costs as the labor market continues to tighten. And one thing that I like to talk about, which I've just been talking to my youngest child is in high school, and he's trying to figure out what he's going to do. And I told him, well, maybe you want to go study business in college, or do a trade and then and study business in college. Maybe you can run an HVAC company one day, or a fleet of electricians. So hopefully the cultural stigma, if you will, and this kind of societal bias that we had. It's like, you got to go to college and you don't go into trades, that there's so
Yeah.
many opportunities out there for young people to get into trades. We certainly got to figure out how to do that. Third topic I thought I'd bring up, what have you seen around tariffs? How have the tariffs impacted the supply chain of equipment in the U.S. market so far this year?
Yeah, I think that the tariffs is probably one of the most challenging things that we've had to deal with this year. Most of it was just the unknown of what will the tariff actually be. I mean, you don't pay for it until you take delivery. And so when you're trying to plan years ahead on where you're going to procure, you don't necessarily know what tariffs are going to be. So it adds another dynamic, which is almost an impossible equation to solve. So as we were, it seemed like earlier this year, it changed weekly about what tariffs were, what countries had what tariffs. And so my market analysis team was going crazy trying to keep up with all of that to try to understand what our exposure is. And then a week later, we have to redo all the analysis to figure it out. I think it's definitely stabilized out a little bit right now. But I guess overall, I mean, you saw I think what it really has just meant for us so far is what was the total price that we had to pay. So I think from a customer standpoint, the customer affordability standpoint, it just costs more to get projects done than what we anticipated, because the equipment we had on order, taken delivery of, got hit with, a variety of different percentage of tariffs depending on what country we imported from. So it really just meant that our projects went up in cost. I think as we looked at other projects like battery energy storage, where we get those, we looked at how much can we bring into domestic supply, how much can we source domestically, and I think we ended up with looking to get about 60% of our battery energy storage facility internal, which again that means trying to go out and qualify those shops, make sure that from a supplier quality that they have good supply, good quality products that they're going to be able to deliver to us, and they actually will be able to deliver to us. But it's kind of like hitting a moving target. It's been very challenging. But I guess in summary, Jeff, I just think thus far, it just seems like the prices are going up, and it's been a little bit of juggling act. We haven't seen a lot of really large scale production, which is what I think was anticipated by the Trump administration hey, we're going to ramp up a bunch of projects and, supply internal, which I think, that would be more of a long-term play. I haven't necessarily seen manufacturers doing a lot of that. And so it really has just been more internal prices, or prices going up, because suppliers aren't necessarily wanting to bet everything on which could be a bubble of the supply demand mix, and trying to onshore more.
Yeah, that uncertainty is a huge disruptor, if you will, when you're trying to make those supply chain decisions. I mentioned NAFTA in the beginning. It was all about, we're kind of, businesses were chasing the wages, right? First down in Mexico and then overseas in China. And, we were making, dollars per hour. But now with these large 25, 30% plus tariffs, then, the natural shift for global manufacturers is to bring that equipment manufacturing back to the U.S. But that's going to take time.
It would.
The couple of companies that I worked for, we did have global manufacturing capabilities. So as an example, we were making finished medical devices, basically the same design. We had a plant down in Florida, and then we also had one over in Suzhou, China, that, we had kind of a dual sourcing strategy for distribution internally. That plant over in Suzhou, it supplied the European market, And we bought about 75% of that equipment for the US. We bring it over on containers. But the rest of it, 25% of it, we manufacture down in Florida. And any type of disruptions or, drop shipments that we had to make normally, you're not going to fly it across from China over and pay that expense. You just ship it directly from Florida. But, if you have dual source type strategy and you can just move it over and you have a certain amount of capacity, that's great. But if you don't have that global footprint, these manufacturers need certainty, long-term certainty to make those business decisions to bring that manufacturing over here. So hopefully, this tariff uncertainty is just about over, and businesses can make those decisions.
Yeah, it's hard to make good business decisions when you really don't have all the information, and that's kind of what the tariffs brought to us. But it did we had to go explore additional manufacturers, different suppliers, and in some cases you would have thought that it could have been helpful, but in one case we had a conductor supplier that was from India, and they were really competitive with our primary supplier. Well, then when the tariffs came in, that secondary supplier then became less competitive than what it was before. And so, again, it maybe drove more eggs into our primary supplier and less into a secondary supplier basket. And so it just, again, I do think a long-term play would be if you could get all of that supply internal to the U.S., you would be able to avoid that. But that's going to take time. And a change in administration wipes all that out likely. So,
right. You think those are long-term effects. If you look at the effect on NAFTA, it definitely took years for that to all flush out through the system. Right. Okay. Well, you kind of mentioned one kind of strategy. I mean, given all these various constraints on the supply chain, what are some of the actions that you're taking kind of short and long term?
Yeah, I think the one thing that COVID showed me is because we did, I think the old school of, hey, if you have multiple suppliers and at least qualified, then you have some advantage to compete in price. I think the one thing that COVID taught me on the flip side of that is we had some very good alliance partnerships. I'd say not necessarily only single source, but that the primary source, we did probably 90, 95% of our business through, and it was all domestic distribution transformers. And so when the COVID hit, we had labor issues, being able to, production issues, couldn't get all the materials in that they needed. So they dropped down production in the distribution transformers. It was that alliance agreement that really helped us get through that. And as they ramped up capacity, they were really only given that incremental capacity to their alliance partners. And so we got a share of, if we were a 40% share of their business, we'd get 40% of their additional production that they went through. And so that certainly helped us weather the storm of COVID. And I think ultimately there needs to be a good balance of that to where you kind of have a really good partnership agreement, alliance partner that you can really work with to standardize your designs. That's the other thing is the more that we've been able to standardize our designs, and they have all of our standard drawings, they know exactly what we need. And of course, that's likely different than a lot of other utilities, but we have different, like steel poles, for example, we have standard designs for so many of our steel poles, and that the drawings are already there. All they have to do is pull the drawing and go manufacture it, versus what we used to do years ago is just almost everything was a custom design. And so the more that we've gotten our manufacturers, our standard designs, it's really helped us. And as we worked with some of those alliance partners, but again, I think it's important to have alliance partners, but I think it's also important to have alternate suppliers as well. And and having an alternate supplier, you're going to need to give them some business as well to keep them, to make sure their quality is good, to make sure that they can produce the what you need and when you need it, in case you do need to take them from a 10% share to a 20% or a 30% share. So you still have to keep feeding them some business. So it's a delicate balance there. I think reservations is the other thing, slot reservations, and even with those standard design companies that we have, we know about how much base we're going to give them. And so we have production slots. Even if we don't know exactly what we're going to run through their shop, we know that we have their production slots available. And then we can tell them to do so many of these standard designs, so many of these standard designs. Earlier that we give them the notice to be able to, of what we actually need, and the PO's cut. So even before we cut a PO, they know that we have reservations. That's helped us tremendously. Give them the certainty, to your point earlier, that they need, that they know that their shop is going to be full. They just might not know what widget they're building on a given day until we release the PO, and then we give them plenty of time to get the material and everything they need. And so we've done a lot of that with transformers, control houses, breakers, switchgear, quite a bit of more of our standard run-of-the-mill T&D equipment. We have those reservations out there, and they know that they're getting production from us. And then the last thing maybe I'd say is, on some of them that we don't have, like more of the one-of-a-kind. So I mentioned our combined cycle project, our simple cycle project, CTs. We had to take a little bit more traditional, I'd say, risk than what we have taken before. Our traditional approach was we got enough time and the market's such that the lead times are okay, that we got enough time to plan and get a certificate of convenience and necessity. We know we got the, approved by a regulator, and then we go place the purchase order. We don't have time to do that, given this big build out of, additional load, generation retirements, additional data center load, bringing it. So we've had to, from an Ameren perspective, maybe go a little bit further out in the risk curve and order some of those really long lead time turbines and transformers and other equipment prior to getting the regulatory approval. We still do expect to get those regulatory, but that's really the only way we can get it built by the time it needs to get built.
Wow, that's kind of unheard of. Supply chain, it's most of the time you're waiting for those purchase orders to come through. And
yeah,
no, that's a great point. I didn't realize that was happening. That's amazing.
Yeah, those are executive level decisions we have to make, and board level decisions we've had to make, that, we know we need to get this done. We know we need regulatory approval, but we just don't have time to go get the regulatory approval yet. But before we need to order this, because slots are filling up for combustion turbines faster than, there's years. So we got in a little early, fortunately, on that, because we were able to do that. And so feel comfortable in the position we're in, but it wasn't without a little bit of risk.
Good to be in the front of the line, not the back of the line on that one.
For sure.
I really like that standardization of equipment one. I know design engineers, and then just we engineers in general, we like to tinker, right? We always like to make things better. But then you end up with all these different SKUs of different types of material. It's no longer off the shelf. It's all engineered product. And I could tell you, being an old manufacturing engineer, on the manufacturing facility side, that's a lot of different setups, right? That's just,
for sure.
You depending on what type of equipment, what you're machining, what you're making, some of these equipment changes, and all the different tooling that you have to maintain and all that type of thing is it's not only availability standpoint, but it drives up cost too, because all that costs money, right? And then the inventory, carrying all that inventory in the supply chain goes up too. So from a cost standpoint, the more we can standardize equipment, not just from availability standpoint, but just also from a cost standpoint, is huge.
Yeah,
you mentioned
Yeah,
Go ahead.
maybe a little comment on that. I mean, it would be, we saw a little bit more of the industry coming together during COVID, when lead times started getting tight, when, okay, what SKU could I take? You know, what is it that I really need and what's a nice to have in my specification? And some of the manufacturers like, you know, we're going to produce these widgets and do you want them or do you not want them? You know, and so there's a little more appetite when supply was super tight and demand was high to maybe utilize someone else's specification rather than your own. But I certainly would like to see more of that, and I need to talk to I'm on the EEI CPO leadership committee, executive committee, and I really need to start trying to drive some of that there. I know the NATF, they've talked about it, the NATF, a little bit about standardization, but to truly get more efficient, I think that all the utilities have to start to, instead of having one off, it took Ameren many years for us, and we're still probably not even all the way there between the legacy utilities to get onto one Ameren standard. That was a challenge. And then to try to get all of the utilities on kind of a one standard widget for a distribution transformer, because everybody likes their own gizmos. Like you said, everybody likes their own things. We all think we build a better mousetrap, but I think that could really help drive more reliability, you know, quicker turnaround, less stock, better resiliency, because you can use anyone else's part because they're all the same. So I would definitely like to encourage more industry involvement in that, to standardize equipment across the board, and instead of a lot of the one-off, like it's kind of like we did, I mentioned earlier on poles. We used to do a custom design on every single steel pole that we built on say a 345 kV system. But now we came up with our own standards, and we can plug and play standards, and maybe some of them are a little bit overbuilt at times than what you might need. But again, you get the efficiencies in other ways through being able to put it through a shop pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity for standardization across, you know, there's tens of billions of dollars that this industry is spending every year, and some amount of standardization makes a lot of sense. Okay, anything else on mind before we go to questions?
Oh, I'm good. Ready for questions.
Courtney, do we have anything in the queue? Would anybody like to ask any questions of Eric? We sure appreciate you taking the time with us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I do like the fire in the background too, by the way.
It's getting a little hot. It's getting a little hot in the back of the neck.
We do have one question that came through. It says, does Ameren work with other utilities nearby to share critical equipment in emergency situations?
Yeah, we do. Certainly there's always been a really good, I mean, that's a good thing about our industry. They're very good at sharing. So there's some informal channels where somebody can call and say, hey, we got an issue, we need a transformer, whatever. But there's a couple of programs that are out there. NATF has the Restore resiliency program, and so you can ask for some of the main thing, but the NATF can also help get folks in touch with people. And then EEI has the STEP. For many years we've had a spare transformer sharing group, but again, it's a pretty small industry when it comes to it, and our neighbors all know each other. So I give you an example. Like we got a nuclear plant. It's a very small nuclear industry. So if we ever need a part, we call around and talk to the other nuclear plants. And we got a sister plant, Kansas City, that many times we'll swap parts back and forth as needed just to help each other out. So, and it goes the same on the T&D side. You know, we do the same for labor too. If they have a major storm or we have a major storm, there's quite a few. We just had some super bad tornadoes earlier this year, and we had, I think, 3,000 or 4,000 linemen from other co-ops and other local utilities and across the country coming in and helping. So that's definitely the thing I love about the utility industry is it's not that competitive. Some of the competitive transmission projects may be changing a little bit of that, but when it comes to keeping the lights on or getting the lights back on, we're very good at helping our neighbors out.
Thanks, Eric. We do have another question when you're ready.
Yep, go ahead.
So you referenced COVID. Were there any other supply chain lessons learned that you had coming out of the pandemic that you've been able to take and apply to your processes now?
Well, again, I mentioned a little bit about just going after alternate suppliers. I think we had some transformers that we had built here in the States, and then they had a sister plant in, I believe it was Brazil, that we ended up getting some supply from. I think from an Ameren perspective, we talked about it, and I'm an engineer, so I can make fun of engineers. We're all like, well, hey, they haven't actually made one for us yet, so we don't really trust their quality or whatever. They used the exact same design. We flew people down, look at their plant. Took a little bit of comfort level to get used to an alternate supplier that we hadn't had production experience with before. So I think that ability, that change, like it's okay if we try a different supplier. And I think those are all really good lessons learned to me from COVID was just that, hey, we might have to look differently, think differently, and go to the market differently. And I think tariffs have been the same way. It's like, we know where our traditional suppliers are, but if we get 145% tariff from China, that it doesn't make economic sense, we have to think differently. And I think that between COVID and the tariffs, I think that's really just helped maybe some of the internal philosophies of being okay to look at alternate suppliers and do things a little bit different and maybe accept somebody else's design. I think we did that on one of our some of our gas turbines, whereas we had our own spec. They're like, well, if you want it, it's going to be based on this spec. That was really our only choice. So we had to okay, well, will it work? Yes, it will work. And so that's what we're getting. So I just think being open to alternate designs and alternate suppliers is always it's a good lesson learned that we kept with us.
Yeah, I think, investing in the purchasing managers, commodity managers, I'm not quite sure how you're structured there, but, folks that really put together a good commodity strategy for their area and coupled with a good quality engineer, to work hand in hand with those manufacturers. And like you said, go out and work with them and help develop those suppliers. And no matter where they are in the world, it's really important work.
Yeah, that's a great point. We were just implementing some category management strategies, right, pre-COVID. And I think as we're maturing in those strategies, it's really helpful for us to really have an expert that kind of knows their category, knows what the market's like, know what costs should be, so we can challenge and negotiate better. That's been another huge learning just as we've matured as an organization over the last 5 years.
Right. Good. Anything else, Courtney?
Yes, we have another one. It's actually a two-parter when you're ready. So, in regards to the topic of lack of supply of skilled labor, do you see any potential solutions to increasing this pool of workers? And the second part is Ameren working with any schools or universities in the area?
Yeah, so it's a good two-part question. I think the first one's maybe a little bit more global answer. From an Ameren perspective, we definitely are. We have apprentice programs. We're working with local schools, trying to get people interested in the trades, getting involved, doing co-ops and interns or just part-time work, leading into these apprentice programs. So we have what we call a pre-apprentice labor program where we bring in the apprentices beforehand, introduce them a little bit to what Ameren does, and then hope to attract them into the apprentice program, and then try to develop, our skill craft that way. There is, as we mentioned, there's a lot of, you think about welders or just, pipe fitters and electricians, and, that's a little bit more challenging for us to develop because we really don't have apprentice programs for those like we do linemen. But that's certainly, more of almost a global, a domestic concern about. I think Jeff mentioned it. It's like we don't have to go. Not everybody should be going to college. We can't have everybody go to college. We need skilled craft, and as that demand goes up, their salary should go up, and need to pay them, and that's a great way to make a living as well. So part of it is maybe breaking the stigma a little bit of that you have to go to college to be successful.
Yeah, some of my happiest friends are carpenters and plumbers, and they're retiring early. Here in where I live on the west side of Cleveland, I'm in Erie County, and there's a lot of county level vocational schools. And, having partnerships with those vocational schools, the businesses coming out and talking about the differences and kind of doing the analysis between college and if you have to take out a student loan and all that versus going to some type of apprenticeship program and that type of thing. Kids are good with their hands and really, maybe don't like the books as much as some of the hands-on stuff. It's really a blend. I mean, you go to some of these vocational, they still got to get into some of the technical requirements of what they're doing, but it's a great path. Great. Anything else, Courtney?
No, that is all. Thank you both very much, gentlemen. And thank you also, Jeff, to supplying your own fireside chat fireplace.
All right. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.